Hi friends, Kara here with Power to the Flower. I wanted to share with you about the Redwood Tree follow-up. We got the ferns in, as you can see behind me, and I'll just share with you how that happens. All of the Redwood Tree ferns came from one plant. I love this plant. It is a Boston fern and it is beautiful. It grows 3 feet tall and it seems to have no capacity for width. It is a relatively quick rejuvenator, but equally not like super fast growth. So I don't anticipate the whole rock garden to be filled in this year, but for sure in the next 2 years, I would expect that the whole thing will be filled with ferns, which I cannot wait. So let me show you how we went about doing this, and then I'll catch you at the end. Today's project begins with irrigation. We need to set it up as well as place the rocks and plant the ferns. So here you see we laid a 1/2-inch tubing underneath the path. It's popping up on either side, and on this side it will eventually hook into our future irrigation system. But for today, I merely need to run the 1/2-inch tubing around the redwood tree, and I'm going to use a 1/2-inch T-coupling. Here, you can see it right here. Here we go. And that way it will have nice pressure for the future once we have this entire system totally hooked in. I left a lot of excess hose purposefully because more is easier than less, and I will just clip that out and use a straight coupler to bring the two ends together. That is kind of like a colectomy. Gotta throw some cancer jokes in there. Okay, the next piece is to put the rock wall together, and we had kind of haphazardly strewn them around to give us the idea that we liked. And then now it was about putting the puzzle together, and I will say it was a lot more difficult than it looks. You see a rock wall and you think, yeah, it looks the way it's supposed to, but trying to fit them together closely so that the soil doesn't leak out the spaces is very difficult. As well, we wanted the edges by the driveway to be higher than the rocks that were on the kind of lifted path area in the center. The other piece to avoid was stacked stones. I really didn't want to have stacked stones as shown here, so we ended up changing this. Once we had that little corner in place as we wanted it, we decided to add some soil in there. So we used firm mulch soil conditioner, which I hadn't used before. We ended up using 1/3 of a bag to 1 wheelbarrow full of native soil, and we're hoping that this is gonna break up our clay soil quite a bit and make it a nice planting area. As soon as we started adding the soil to the bed, we realized, oh dear, we have a problem. The soil started escaping out the cracks between the rocks. So we had some landscape fabric on hand and decided to use it in the tricky spots at like this corner. That we just made this idea up as we went. It seemed like a good one. So I cut strips of the landscape fabric and used it as backing against the rocks, and then I cut 3 holes in each of the strips, thinking that this will allow plants that we plant in this bed to grow down into the native soil. They'll find their way. We just used soil itself to keep the landscape fabric in place. This was a very flim-flam idea, but in the end, it did the job and it kept the soil from seeping out between the rocks. And this is where one 6-year-old got a hold of the camera for a few minutes, but eventually we wrinkled it back and made some good progress with the stone placement. And it was this point that we decided to remove the stacked stones and change some of the stones around so that it would be a single stone wall. To fix the problem of dirt seeping out the bottom of the stone wall, we decided to use polymeric sand, which is over here. You add water and it becomes hard like stone instead of sand, but it looks like sand. So day 2, dun dun dun, here is the stacked stone wall, and it's mostly backfilled with native soil and the firm mulch. I'm going to add some compost today and start planting So here's my Boston fern. This came from a propagation of the original mother plant from one sprig, and over the last couple years it has grown to fill its entire 7-gallon nursery pot. So it's propagation time. What I'm gonna do is literally cut this plant like a cake. In the meantime, you can see the little drain holes have little propagations popping out, and I've pulled them all and I will plant all of those. Once the plant has been removed from the pot, then I lay it on its side and literally cut it down the middle like a cake. Look for natural breaks in the plant, and those would be the space where you would want to give it a cut. Now that I have 2 halves to the plant, it will be much easier to slice these up into whatever size parts that I want. The fronds do get twisted up inside of each other, and so there will be some fronds sacrificed during this propagation process. At this point, you also want to have a look at the inside of the plant, really low there. There are fronds that have been broken or clipped down, and they're just kind of hard sticks, and you want to cut those off at the soil level. I decided to cut this plant into 5 pieces. You can see the 3 here, and then I wrestled the last piece in half again, and I am very happy with the result. And now it's planting time. I ended up using earthworm castings in each hole and a bit of starter fertilizer in each hole. I then added one 1-gallon per hour drip line to each hole, and here's the result. So I hope that was helpful. That's how we propagated those ferns. I'll give you a little looky at the end here. It's now about a month after planting, and we're hand watering still because we don't have the irrigation hooked up, but it's ready to go for when we do put it together. And it's going great. It's being watered by rain and by hand, very inconsistently, and they're definitely doing well. You can see, I'll show you in just a second, that there is some dying fronds, which is totally to be expected when you're cutting a plant and hacking it up like that. But based on my experience, it will come back full on in the spring. Okay, and so you can see on this one, there is some brown foliage. So it's suffering a bit, but you can also see that we've got new growth coming up and looking fabulous. So not to worry. Eventually what I'll do is I'll just cut those fronds right out, but I'm just gonna wait until the springtime to do that and give these plants a little bit of time to come back to their normal selves. But there you go. The other thing that we're doing is this is a zone 10 and 11 plant, and so we're covering it if the temperature drops close to freezing. Although zone 10 is 30 degrees as the lowest average temperature, we live in zone 9B, which is 25 to 30 degrees is the lowest average temperature. So they should be fine, but just to make sure, because they're kind of tender right now, I'm treating them like little babies. We just cover them if it's 35 degrees or less with some white paper, and I'll show you a picture of that. We take the paper off in the morning and gets great sun, and then we just kind of watch the weather. So it's now about 40s in the evening, so we're just leaving the paper off. You can see that we used the polymeric sand, and so now this is hard as concrete. This is easy, makes it really easy to blow and clean, but it looks quite natural, I think. And so I'm really happy with this whole project. I'm so excited for these ferns to grow their little heads off, and I'll be showing you updates as we go along here. Okay, that's the end of the video. Thanks so much for joining me. Merry Christmas, and looking forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks for joining Power to the Flower, a Zone 9 gardening channel. Bye!